Welcome to another episode of Your Cup of Counsel. This one's a little bit of a tough one. We're covering a challenging topic, sexual assault cases, and what it's like to be a sexual assault victim litigating what is probably one of the hardest claims. We also give tips on how to find a lawyer that is sensitive enough to handle this topic area. And we drink some blue bottle coffee and try and be very honest and pragmatic about what is a tough topic. So we'd love to hear your feedback on this and other episodes. Please share far and wide. This is such an important topic to cover. And follow and like and subscribe on all the channels. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Tamara, we both handle sexual assault cases. You handle sexual harassment cases in the workplace. So let's talk about our clients and what they go through on the litigation end after the assault and after the harassment, and how oftentimes the victim blaming and shaming continues throughout the case, and how unfortunate that is, and what steps we do to help our clients mentally and emotionally prepare for that trauma that's going to happen in the case, and then also, just how to counsel them around that.
Yeah, it's such an unfortunate thing. And I think when you have such an egregious situation of sexual assault, for example, often the only defense that the defense attorneys can come up with is either framing the victim as a liar and saying that they are not telling the truth about the fact that it happened, period, or that maybe they admit that it happened, but that it wasn't as harmful to that person as we're saying it is, right? So there's not a whole lot of defenses that you can come up with to that type of conduct. So that's probably why that one is the most common. And I think the thing for victims to know, and what I always tell my clients is, when you're trying to get monetary compensation for something sexual that's happened to you, that opens the door, unfortunately, to the defendant going into your past. And usually, this happens in any of my cases where we're seeking emotional distress. So putting aside the sexual assault and those types of things, those types of claims, anytime in the employment context that I'm seeking emotional distress damages for my client, the defendant wants to question causation, right? They want to say, well, what we did or what happened in the workplace may have caused some part of it or none of it, because your client had all of this other trauma and all of these other emotional things that have happened. And if they're really sad and anxious and depressed and have PTSD now, it's not because of anything we did, it's because of all of their past trauma. And unfortunately, as humans walking this earth, most people have some type of trauma, whether it's a death of a parent or something horrible that's happened. So that's always what I warn my clients about is we can go forward with this and seek these damages, but it is going to open up all of your therapy records. And now, not all, there's limits, but it opens up a lot of stuff that can be really painful for our clients.
Same. So in the PI space, if I'm claiming emotional distress beyond garden variety, so just like general pain and suffering, but something more advanced, depression, anxiety, PTSD, then it does open kind of the historical background of what they've gone through in their life and what they've sought mental health treatment for. And so I'm always very upfront with clients. We can add this as an element of your case. And I'm not saying you don't have a claim, because when we're talking about it, they definitely have a claim, but they have to understand that they're going to put their life in that kind of sphere under a microscope. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to share and kind of open up some old wounds potentially on some other traumas. Mm-hmm. So the client just needs to be fully advised and understand what they're signing up for if we include that as a component to their claim. Mm-hmm. So that's just in the PI space or in the employment space. But in sex assault in particular, mm-hmm. you're going to open up that space no matter what. Mm-hmm. It's kind of not so much a choice. Sexual history, other sexual assaults, rapes, traumas, child abuse, that all gets unearthed mm-hmm. in those cases. And that can be really traumatic. Mm-hmm. And as attorneys, it's really important that we understand how to deal with people that have had traumatic experiences, how to navigate and talk about those issues with clients, because we don't want to be re-triggering,
Right.
to make them sit in the trauma, relive it.
Right.
Some attorneys that don't have like trauma-informed training don't understand how to interact with clients that have had traumatic events happen.
Yep.
And that's really sad. And I always hope that people that are victims of sexual assault or child abuse know how to find attorneys that handle these types of areas that can help navigate those claims and be really respectful and smart about how they're making the clients relive those experiences.
Right. I mean, one basic example, and I heard this from one of my clients who had spoken to another attorney before coming to me and ultimately choosing me as her attorney, is making a client tell their story multiple times over and over and over again, just because the attorney isn't organized enough to keep notes or whatever. And that's the kind of thing where that's totally avoidable, right? There's no excuse for that. And you shouldn't have to force your client to relive something that was so horrible again and again and again. Now, obviously, they need to review the complaint. They do need to relive it by talking to you about it, but there are things that you can do to make it as easy as possible for people.
And also working with the defense attorney, and hopefully you get a respectful defense attorney, not always the case, but working to set parameters on length of the deposition, what we're going to cover if we're going to have multiple days of deposition, to try and make it more manageable for the client that is unfortunately going to have to relive some of it and tell that story. Because the defense is entitled to probe those issues, to ask those questions. You just hope that as legal professionals, they're doing so in a respectful and mindful manner, which isn't unfortunately always the case.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can speak to some of the confidentiality protections that exist for sex assault victims and for minors too. Like, is every single part of this going to be in the public forum? And maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
So I always tell clients, we can file as a Jane Doe or John Doe. So your name is going to stay out of public filings. There's ways that we can enter into confidentiality agreements should the victim decide that they want to participate in a confidentiality agreement, so that none of this becomes public. So there definitely are steps that you can take as an attorney to protect the identity of your clients, so that when they do come forward, they don't necessarily have to put their whole life under the public eye. Like we saw that recently in the P. Diddy trials, right? Some of the victims that came forward as Jane Does, and their identity was kept out of the media.
Yeah. I mean, even still though, you're still as a victim having to share your story with strangers, right? It's the defense attorney, it's the the insurance adjusters on the other side. It's the court reporter and the people that are in the room while you're doing it. So we can promise some confidentiality, but you're still sharing it with strangers, unfortunately. And if you go to a jury trial, then the jury is going to hear these things, right? So that is difficult. But, I think the way that I also try and frame it so that I'm not totally deterring victims from coming forward and litigating their claims, because that is another thing that we see, right? People just saying, I don't even want anything to do with that. I don't care that what I've been through is compensable, and I don't care that I could get damages for it. It's just not worth it. I don't want to do it. And obviously that's a deeply personal choice, and their decision.
And that's part of the conversation you have with them.
Absolutely.
Right? When they come in.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I also, for anyone that's listening that might be wondering if they should pursue a legal claim, I think from our clients, that you can tell me if this has been your experience too, but there is something, I don't want to say satisfying, that's definitely not the right word, but there's a piece of it that can be a little bit, at least vindicating or maybe gratifying.
Healing,
to feel like you're fighting back. You're not taking it lying down. You're not taking it, without trying to stand up for yourself and having a good lawyer in your corner who's going to bat for you. And keep in mind, 90%, 95% of cases end up settling. So the chances of you actually publicly going to trial in front of a jury on your sex assault case are definitely lower than not, or not trying your case there's a higher likelihood you won't try your case, what I'm trying to say. And there's a piece to that of not wanting to let your perpetrator win, right? It's like the feeling of trying to get accountability. And also in my context, if I have some clients who've been sexually assaulted in the workplace, so I'm not just suing the assaulter themselves, I'm suing the employer for not preventing it from happening and from knowing about it and not doing anything despite my clients reporting it or whatever the case may be. And that can have a deterrent effect. So my client knows that at least her standing up and using her voice might prevent future victims from being harmed.
Absolutely. I have a few cases like that. I have, unfortunately, sex assault is not age specific. It happens across the board. It happens to minors, it happens to middle-aged people, and it happens to elderly people. I have a few sex assault cases in elderly nursing home settings, which is so tragic. And I had one recently where the client was kind of unsure about whether they did or didn't want to pursue a claim, not because they didn't have a claim, they absolutely did, not because they didn't have damages, they absolutely did. It was just, is it worth it to me? And ultimately they decided to go forward because they wanted to protect other victims. So the family collectively was like, if we can out this perpetrator, other families won't have to experience this trauma. And that's hugely self-sacrificing, that they're going to put themselves through the litigation to come forward and be the voice, but hugely satisfying because now this person has been eliminated by the state, essentially. He's blocked from working in elder care facilities. And so that in itself is a win for them, right? Like they've got justice just by making sure that this person can't victimize other families.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the bottom line is, and this is another really unfortunate aspect of our world, is that the more vulnerable the people are, the more susceptible they are to being victimized by sexual predators. And that is true. And that's why, unfortunately, sex assault in elderly homes is like a major thing, because these are people who, I mean, some of these elderly folks don't have family to fight back against them. Some of them have dementia or other issues that preclude them from reporting even the conduct or knowing that it's happening. And I mean, that's just some of the most heinous, some of the most heinous conduct that you can imagine. But that's also why our job is so important, because we are the voice of the people that are the voiceless, right? That can't stand up for
themselves. And if you don't stand up to the big corporations that are hiring and understaffing and hiring unqualified people and not properly doing criminal background checks and letting these people in the doors where they can perpetrate on these vulnerable people, by standing up to these corporations, you're changing the conduct. You're ensuring that the next time they hire a crop of caretakers, they're going to vet, they're going to do the criminal background check. And so your advocacy in one case has impact across the industry, or at least within that company, which can be really satisfying.
Hopefully it does, right? That's what we always hope for.
That's what we tell ourselves.
Well, and just to be very, very clear about this, right? There are specific choices that companies are making that are usually driven by profit when they decide not to do background checks and to hire people. And this has been a big thing with massage envy, for example. We have friends who do sexual assault cases against massage envy because, and I'm not saying, these are all publicly litigated cases, but what happened in those cases is that they unraveled and revealed a method of hiring that really was not diligent about looking at the background of their masseuses, because they earned more profit the more massages that could happen, obviously. And it was hard to staff with enough massage therapists. And so they would hire kind of whoever. And again, that's a place where somebody is very vulnerable. You're naked, you're on a massage table. There's very few sort of protections in that room to deal with if you're being victimized or not. And it can sometimes happen very quickly, right? And so anyway, that was a long-standing pattern of conduct that had happened for a long time. And hopefully after all of the litigation around that, there's been some policy changes to making sure that people have background checks. Because if there are massage therapists who had like a background of sexual assault, they weren't being vetted and massages are another place where a lot of sexual misconduct happens, just in general. I don't mean to call it massage envy, but just in general. I mean, a lot of
we see it in the rideshare space too.
Right. Huge.
There's
Uber and Lyft.
Drivers that aren't the actual driver on the app. There's people sharing one login credential. There's 8 or 9 people using it. And so there's not proper vetting of all the drivers. I mean, there's so many different scenarios where a rider can find themselves either in the wrong car, in a car with a person that's not the vetted driver.
Yep.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of sexual assault that's happening in that space.
Yeah,
And there's a ton of litigation going on right now. And I've had those cases also, in particular, young women,
Yep.
in particular, young females that are intoxicated,
Right.
trying to get a safe ride home at the end of the night.
I was just going to say, that's another space for vulnerable populations, right? When do you call an Uber? When you've had too much to drink, right?
Right.
And it's very predatory for that reason.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I see, unfortunately, in a lot of sex assaults and childhood abuse cases is that a lot of those folks are victimized multiple times.
Yeah.
And so they have like, it's a family member and then it's another family member, or it's a family member and then they go to boarding school and then something happens at boarding school. So they tend to find themselves re-victimized. And then there's a lot of victim shaming because the defense is like, oh, well, this keeps happening to you. It must be you. And that's so offensive.
It's horrible. And that is such a psychological phenomenon, right? I mean, there is something around internal family systems and the way that your brain develops if you're sexually assaulted at a young age. And I know you've probably seen this with the experts that you've worked with on your cases who can explain this to juries and things like that. But it is a psychologically like measured thing that happens. So if you've experienced a sexual abuse multiple times, you find yourself in situations where it happens again by no real fault of your own. A lot of it is subconscious, and you try and create conditions that feel like home, and home feels really horrific for some people. And so it's totally tragic. And this is why, I have a lot of respect for the bravery required for victims to come forward and litigate these types of claims, because it is no small feat. And, by and large, victims are telling the truth, right? Which is why this whole defense idea is so frustrating, because it's not like there's a bunch of people making all of this up.
Right.
Like it is so painful.
They don't want to put themselves through this trauma.
Right.
Yeah.
Why? Who would choose this? Right. So it's just up to us to be like arbiters of the truth and try and make the truth shine. And hopefully I trust juries when they evaluate claims like this to understand what actually happened.
So how do people in this space find good lawyers? Like if you have been victim of a sexual assault or sexual abuse, whatever the setting, how do you find a trusted lawyer that has trauma-informed training, that's going to fight for you and also protect you and protect your privacy and really go to bat? Like, how do you find those people?
Yeah, it's really hard. I don't think that there is a good website or something that you can go to. I know you and I are really active in the Consumer Attorneys of California, and that is our plaintiffs group for plaintiffs lawyers in California who practice in a variety of areas. They have a search function on their website where you can search by practice area. And by geography. So that's always what I tell people is like a good place just to start as a starting off point. But you can also, a lot of lawyers will list on their websites whether they have trauma-informed care or trauma-informed training. Those are all also kind of keywords that are good to listen to look at. But I think the best measure is probably just meeting with lawyers and talking to them and getting a sense of them.
Right.
You can really trust your instinct. You want someone that you trust, that you feel like is smart and knows what they're doing, and that is willing to take the time with you on your terms in the way that you're the most comfortable and talk through your claims. So those are some pointers that I can think of. But what do you think?
I completely agree. And then also get a feel for them when you meet with them. Do they make me relive my trauma? Do they appear to trust what I'm telling them? You just kind of try and get a vibe from them for sure.
Right. Okay, well, on this tough topic, let's talk about the coffee that we're drinking, which is
Blue Bottle.
Blue Bottle,
Yeah.
That's right. We love Blue Bottle coffee. There's a Blue Bottle in San Mateo that is very good for me to do client meetings and to meet with and work with. But guess what? They don't have outlets anywhere. So you cannot plug in your laptop.
That's a new phenomenon. I think
intention.
A lot of coffee shops are taking away outlets because they want people to come and go and not post up.
Yeah. So grab your coffee and go if you're going to Blue Bottle.
Grab your coffee and go. Go to Blue Bottle. There's also one in FiDi right down the street from our office, which is where we spend a lot of our time mingling and getting coffee and having chats about what our next podcast topics should be.
And on that note, tell us what your podcast topics should be, everybody, because we would like to hear feedback.
Definitely. Drop them in the comments.
We'll
cover them next time.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.